What's good, YouTube? This is Boxingwave, and we are back with another fight breakdown. This weekend, Tszyu who is a newly crowned WBO champion at 154. He's going to be defending his title against the current WBC interim champion, Brian Mendoza. This fight is going to be on Showtime, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't know if they're going to show an entire card. I don't know if they're just going to show the main event. But I will be doing live commentary for this fight. I will not miss this fight. I can't wait to see this fight. So be sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and tune in this Saturday for this fight, because this is going to be a goodie. All right, so let's talk about this fight, man. First of all, the styles match up well. You know, you got two KO artists, guys that's coming off some of their best career wins, you know, in recent years with knockout wins. You know what I mean? And they have somewhat of the same amount of experience. You know, Mendoza, he's been pro a couple of years longer, but they have roughly around 24, 23 matches, okay? Tszyu is still undefeated at this time. I believe he's 23 wins, 17 knockouts, something like that. And then you got Mendoza, that's like 22 wins, 16 knockouts, with a couple of losses. Now, those are not knockout losses. Those were pretty competitive fights that he took and he had losses in, okay? I was able to go back and see both fights between Jesus Ramos and the Larry Gomez from back in the day. All right, so I was able to check those two fights out, and we'll briefly discuss those losses with Brian Mendoza, all right? But as far as age, they're around the same age. I believe Brian Mendoza is 29, Tszyu 28. As far as height and reach, I think Brian Mendoza is slightly taller, and then Tszyu got a slightly longer reach. All right. So let's talk about the two fighters. Let's start out with Brian Mendoza, because I believe that this is the first time I actually did a breakdown for a fight that involved him. Now, Brian is the current WBC interim champ. You know that Jermell Charlo is still holding the full belt for that title. Now, whether or not Jermell comes back to 154 to defend those titles, we'll see. All right, but the winner of this fight could be fighting Jermell Charlo next. All right, but Brian Mendoza, WBC interim champ, is coming off two of his best wins. Okay, he beat Jason Rosario, who is the former unified champion at 154. All right, he was able to stop him, destroyed him. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was like 5 rounds or so. All right, knocked him out, dropped him early, and then knocked him out like in 5 rounds or something like that with a crazy shot. All right, so he's coming off of that win, and then he went into fighting the undefeated Sebastian Fundora. We know he had one of the better fights last year against Erickson Lubin, where he stopped Lubin. You know, one of the monsters. He's like 6'5", fighting at 154. And Mendoza actually knocked him out in a fight that I thought Mendoza was actually losing on the cards. Okay, and now he's going straight into this fight with Tszyu. And if I can just briefly discuss his style, he's a counterpuncher. He's not a high volume guy. All right, he loves to use the ring. He likes to move. Okay, he's pretty good defensively. He likes to keep his head off the line, you know, and he's really not a guy that's big on the combos like that. You know, he's more of a guy that is just, he's moving and he's looking to take advantage of his great timing. All right, good solid speed. Obviously, he has great KO power. He's been up pretty durable up to this point, you know, fighting guys like Jesus Ramos. Even though Ramos won the fight and he lost, he was able to go the distance with the bigger, more powerful Ramos. You know what I mean? I don't think I've seen him down before in a fight. I've seen him, you know, take some pretty good shots from some good fighters. And I've seen him take some punishment. I see some bruises in some of his fights, but he seemed to be a pretty durable guy up to this point. All right. And, you know, he's a guy that's always going to be dangerous no matter what, you know, because I think one of the flaws and the major flaws with Brian Mendoza is that he doesn't throw a lot, and I don't think he has the best gas tank. I wouldn't say that his conditioning is the worst, but it's not the best. And I can see guys winning rounds against him. Outside of Jason Rosario, when I look at the Fundora fight, for example, he's losing the rounds because of activity. When I see the Gomez fight that he lost, a split decision, very close fight, 8-rounder, I can see that there were points where he seemed to be fading a little bit. And when he fades, kind of like Caleb Plant a little bit, when he fades, the defense begins to fail. He starts getting hit with unnecessary shots, right? And even when I look at the Ramos loss too, Ramos was just more active, more aggressive. He's pushing the fight forward. And even though Brian Mendoza liked to work off the counter, right? He likes to set those traps. At the end of the day, he's not really throwing enough. You know what I mean? So unless he is landing really effective shots, if he's not landing many of them, it's very easy to give the opponent the round. You know what I mean? So I think that is one of his biggest flaws in these fights coming up. And if this fight happens to go the distance, because up to this point, both of these fighters seem pretty durable. I know Tszyu got dropped a couple times early in fights, but outside of that, he seems like those were flash knockdowns. He doesn't seem like he's a guy that is just like chinny or anything like that. You know what I mean? He's been fighting some decent punchers, all right? But going back to Brian Mendoza, I think one of the other flaws with him, sometimes he tends to lead lunge in with the right hand. I think there's two things. When you're fighting Tszyu, he lunges in, he throws the right hand. Sometimes he's a little too far out. And another thing is sometimes when he throws the right hand, he tends to leave it out there a little bit too long. And being that his chin somewhat gets exposed, you don't want a guy like Tszyu who has a very, very powerful left hook to time you and catch you with that left hook, because Tszyu is not going to only hit you with the left hook, but he's going to follow it up with a right and a left and a right. He likes to throw combinations. He fights off the counter as well, but he's throwing combinations with his. You know what I mean? Both have power, but there is two totally different approaches. They both like to counter. They both have power, but Tszyu likes to throw combination, and we'll get to him in a moment. So those are the key things with Mendoza. I think he's always dangerous because he can hurt you with one punch. But as far as activity and aggression, he kind of lacks there. So you can beat him on points. All right, but he's always dangerous. So with one punch, he can change the fight. Just ask Sebastian Fundora in that last fight. All right. Going to Tszyu, I've talked about Tszyu, and I thought, I brought up his strengths and weaknesses leading up to the Tony Harrison fight. When you watch the Terrell Gausha fight, which I went back and watched some of that fight. I went back because we have two orthodox fighters now. I understand that Brian Mendoza, some of the best fighters he's fought has been southpaw. But we got two orthodox fighters here. So going back, I was watching Tszyu a little bit with Tony Harrison. I was watching a little bit with the Terrell Gausha fight. Gausha was able to drop him in the first round because I think Tszyu is a stalker. He's coming straight forward, and he's looking to counter with combinations, normally wide combinations, right? So what the problem is, sometimes Tszyu is just a little too square in his stance and his approach, and he's fighting out of a high guard, so he's not as slip as Brian Mendoza. Again, Brian Mendoza likes to move to this, like he likes to move laterally a lot. He likes to keep his head on the line. He has a little slickness to him. Whereas Tszyu's approach is like he's coming forward out of the high guard, and he's looking to slip real quick and counter you with, power shots. That's his thing. He doesn't throw many jabs. Most of the time, the jab is just there to set up the next big shot. So Tszyu's flaw really is fighting out of the high guard. Obviously, you're going to expose certain parts of yourself, your body area. You know, guys are going to punch and throw shots around the guard. But the thing with Tim Tszyu, he's so explosive. I don't think Brian Mendoza is as explosive as Tim Tszyu. Yeah, they have power, but Tim, very, very quick and very explosive. And he can kind of ambush you at any time, you know? So I think where Tim Tszyu is going to have a little bit of trouble against Brian, as opposed to like a Tony or a Terrell Gausha, is those guys, even though Tony in the past have moved well in certain fights, like he did against Jared Hurd. Jared Hurd, who was a pressure fighter, and that was just coming forward. Tony displayed better movement in that fight than he did in the Tim Tszyu fight. Tim Tszyu is kind of just waiting and stalking. He's waiting for you to throw first. You know, he rarely leads with his shots. He's waiting for you. He's walking you down and he's staying right in front of you. Whereas Mendoza, you're going to see a lot more shuffles. You're going to see him changing directions a little bit. You're going to see him changing levels a little bit. You're going to see him doing a lot more than the recent opponents that Tim Tszyu had. Terrell Gausha, right in front of him. Tony Harrison, right in front of him. Ocampo, who was his last opponent fight, the highlight of the fight is the whole fight because it only lasted one round. You know, stood right in front of him. A lot of these guys try to square up with him, and I think Brian Mendoza is going to be a little bit smarter, and I think he's going to do better. And I actually believe stylistically, Mendoza will be the most dangerous fight for Tim Tszyu up to this point. You know, I think Tony has a lot of talent, but we know his flaws. Not the most durable fighter. Once he gasses out, he becomes even less durable. All right. And a lot of these guys stopped him on the second half of the fight, whether he was winning or not. I don't think Tony was even winning that fight at that point. But Tony's approach didn't use the ring as much as he should. Mendoza's going to use the ring, but he's not going to overuse the ring. All right. He's just going to be shifting gears a little bit, moving, just to create new angles, you know what I mean? Create new opportunities instead of just standing right in front of Tim Tszyu. Another thing is with Tim Tszyu is I haven't really seen him fight going backwards yet. Everybody has fought him on their back foot pretty much. You know, even when you go back and look at a fighter like Jeff Horn, who's always been a pretty aggressive fighter, Tim Tszyu even kind of forced them to go backwards in that fight, you know? So I'm yet to see that. If Brian Mendoza, I don't know if Brian's going to try to take that approach, but he may try to take that approach, you know? And if he does, it could be a problem because I don't know how Tim Tszyu is good at being pressured. He's always pressuring the opponent by coming forward and keep holding his ground and being the general when it comes to that. It'll be really interesting if Brian Mendoza is able to do it to him. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it. I would expect someone maybe like a Jesus Reyes or Jesus Ramos to be able to do it. But at 154, I can't really see anyone really backing him up. Even if Jamel were to come back down, I can't really see anyone do it. It's just that these guys are going to start working behind the counter. But I think the problem is, if you can't really hurt Tim Tszyu, you're not going to be more explosive than him, you know? And I think that is the problem with these fighters. They work off the counter, yes, and you might catch him. You might even drop him early to wake him up. But he's so powerful, and he throws the way his combinations are so violent that he's just so hard to deal with consistently. Even if you catch him, can you maintain it? And the one flaw and the biggest flaw I have with Brian Mendoza is that he needs to hurt you. He needs to hurt you to win the fight. Not saying he can't do it here, but he's going to have to hurt Tim Tszyu. Brian Mendoza winning on the scorecards, I don't see it happening at all. You know, unless he's able to drop Tim Tszyu multiple times, I cannot see Brian Mendoza outworking and outscoring Tim Tszyu. I can't see it. I just can't see it. He would have to either knock Tim Tszyu out or hurt him continuously throughout the fight to win, to collect those rounds and get those rounds in the bag. And, you know, I think that is going to be very, very hard to do. Even coming off of those knockout wins that he had recently, I think Tim Tszyu's approach is a little bit more calculated than a Jason Rosario, even though he was a former unified champ. His approach is much more calculated. He's much smarter. And the same thing with Sebastian Fedor. Those guys, I don't think they're as good as Tim Tszyu. You know what I'm saying? So I think it would be harder for Mendoza to be able to do that. Whereas in Tim Tszyu, not only can I see Tim Tszyu winning on points if it goes there, but I also could see Tim Tszyu stopping Brian Mendoza late in the fight just from simply outworking him. Mendoza has shown to be durable up to this point, but he hasn't fought anyone like Tim Tszyu. You know what I'm saying? Tim Tszyu is explosive, and he keeps the pressure going. And once you begin to slow down, like I've seen Mendoza have in other fights, he's going to be a lot more hittable. He's going to be taking big shots. It might be too much for him. I haven't decided how I'm going to bet this one because I do think Mendoza, I see this being like a 60-40 fight where I think when I look at the betting odds, I think Mendoza was like a plus 450 if you bet straight up underdog. And I think Tim Tszyu was like, I thought it was just a little too wide. I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but Tim Tszyu is a pretty healthy favorite to win. And I think Mendoza, I think this is more like a 60-40 because I do think Mendoza's chances of winning is better than Tony's and is better than, anybody else that he's faced up to this point. But simply because of the knockout power, and because of the boxing, but the lack of activity makes it a little bit difficult for him to win rounds. So I think I might put a little bit down on Mendoza straight up, not by knockout, not by decision. I'm not going to do by knockout because I don't know if he can actually knock. I don't know. I would probably just place a little bit of money just in case he gets the win somehow. And for Tim Tszyu, I haven't decided if I'm going to put him on winning on points or by knockout. I will by Saturday. But what I will say is that as far as my prediction, I'm expecting Tim Tszyu to win. It can be by either late stoppage. I'm thinking no earlier than like the 8th round. You know what I mean? No earlier than that. Anything, maybe I'm thinking more in like the championship rounds, probably. If he is to get a stoppage. And I think if it goes the distance and it goes, I see Tim Tszyu winning. He's going to be winning more rounds going in. Brian Mendoza is just not going to be active enough in order to win on points to me, in my opinion. So I haven't decided where I'm going to go as far as betting, but Tim Tszyu wins this fight to me. Tim Tszyu wins this fight. I think it's an excellent fight. I do think Mendoza has a good chance. Again, I said it's 60-40. Mendoza it's going to be his toughest fight. And don't be surprised if you see Tim Tszyu get buzzed early. We've seen it before, but don't be surprised if we see him get hurt by a shot or get dropped early. All right? He might need to get hit hard in order for him to wake up. All right? Brian Mendoza is going to be always dangerous. And don't be surprised if Mendoza catch him later because he knocked Fedor out in the 7th round. It wasn't early in the fight. You know what I mean? So Mendoza is always dangerous. And as long as Tim Tszyu fights a disciplined fight, he should be able to win on points or just by stopping him late. But he has to take a different approach and be very smart. Apply calculated pressure. Calculated, okay? Don't get reckless because you don't want to walk in and get hit and clipped with a bomb. All right? This is going to be a great fight. And I think you're going to see different people are going to be in control. Different fighters are going to be in control at certain points in this fight. All right? But I think Tim Tszyu is going to figure it out a way to win this one. And he's going to remain undefeated, all right? Anyway, that's my prediction. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Great fight. Again, I will be doing live commentary for this one. And I'll see you guys on Saturday. Peace.